I burned 3 fingerprints off my left hand yesterday, and that isn't the part I'm scared to say out loud. The part that won't come out clean is this. I heard people breathing inside a wall, the way a kid breathes after crying so hard they hiccup between words, and when one of them finally pushed air through whatever hole was left in them, it squeezed out a single word that set my legs to jelly. Help! It didn't sound like a ghost. It sounded like someone forced through a funnel. I quit because of that, sure, but also because an old man with tendon string arms and a nicotine cough leaned across a basement door and spoke nonsense that felt like static in my teeth. He called it a prayer. I call it a lockpick, because when he finished saying it, the air in the basement bent, not like wind, but like heat above an engine, and I felt light slap my back like a breaker popping, except it was brighter than welding, brighter than the sun. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. It pressed through my shirt, and everything smelled like pennies and snow. That's the part my girlfriend says is where I start lying. I didn't want to be an electrician, not even close. But there's only so long you can sling plates and argue about split checks before something in your spine slumps for good. She put her finger on my chest and said, "Do something." The restaurant had eaten my weekends for 3 years, and the tips weren't the worst, but she was right. I didn't have a degree. I could reach a high shelf and say, "How we doing tonight?" with a smile that made old people relax. That was it. The union said, "You show up, you learn, you get a real trade." I told myself, electricity is invisible. It's clean. It's rules and numbers. You can make it safe if you respect it. Messy people get messy injuries. Careful people get to go home. Enter Gary. Sinew and bone and a laugh like a man dragging a chair over concrete. Bald as a peeled onion and older than my father, but somehow always 2 steps ahead of me on a ladder. First day I met him, he handed me a coil of Romex and watched the way I held it like he was checking my handwriting. "You're late," he said. I wasn't. He moved like he could see the job 3 seconds into the future, and if I didn't already have my hand on the right tool, he'd purse his lips like I'd offended him personally. I spent that first week with a headache from looking at his hands. He taught by talking, didn't ask if I wanted to hear. The world was his truck, and I was strapped into the passenger seat, and every mile he poured stories into the air and let them pile up on my knees. Utah and Ohio and Maine. Metal shops and hospitals, and a church that wanted hardwired bells. Half of it sounded like the bragging kind of bullshit old guys store in their lungs. But there was a rhythm to it that kept me from tuning him out. I was bone, sir, every night keeping pace with him, and because my feet were moving, my ears were open. That's probably why the late Catherine memory nailed itself to the inside of my skull the first time he lodged it there. He waited until we were stuck in traffic behind a sugarcane truck, both of us breathing exhaust and sweet, wet rot, and he said real casual, "You ever hear about the blue flash down south?" I told him no. I'd camped near Lake Catherine when I was a kid. That was it. He said, 15 years now. Family moved into an old place down there. Browns. Good folks. Had a cellar problem. He smiled without looking at me, like he was trying to see if I'd reach for the bait. Not electrical. He had timing. He let the road, noise fill the pause. I asked what kind of problem a cellar could have that wasn't a leak. Spiritual, he said, like he was telling me the weather. But they called an electrician anyway, like folks do when they don't want to think. Now listen, there was an apprentice there, not much older than you. He stepped in the wrong room at the wrong time, and the blue flash took him. Bright as an arc sounded like a bomb. I was in the other room. Lucky me. He tapped his ear. Hard of hearing since. I glanced at his hearing aids. He wasn't wearing any. "What's the blue flash?" I said, meaning what's it supposed to be? Something that comes when it wants. Beginning of November. Every year. He rubbed his thumb and forefinger together like he was rolling lint. Family before the Browns hire my boss. He went in. The air snapped. Like a finger. When it stopped, he was meat smoking on the floor. Stank like hell's own kitchen. Burned but not burned. You don't want to think about how a body looks when it's squeezed. I didn't. He kept going anyway. I came back after. Checked the wires. Nothing wrong. Nothing ever wrong. He laughed. It wasn't an old man's laugh. It was a laugh you hear in a dream and wake up sweaty. So I did what a good man does. I kept checking. Every year, same time. Made sure nobody got close. Looked responsible. Took a fee. What about the Browns? He told me the kid's name like he was testing my mouth. Jessica. Girl got half blind from it. Blue flash got her eye. Parents wanted an electrician to fix God. I told them what I'm telling you. Not this world's problem. They didn't listen. I heard later they bricked the cellar. Tried to keep something meant to pass through the world trapped inside a box. Flash came early that year. October. Took the house apart like paper. They found the parents and the brother in the walls. He licked the corner of his lip, twisted up thin as wire. I snorted. Couldn't help it. He looked out the windshield and didn't move. The sugarcane truck lurched forward and the smell hit stronger, like cut green sweetness rotting in a bucket. He said, "Not funny." I told him it was a hell of a story. He said, "Story's what you call a thing when you're too scared to say it's the truth." I should have dropped it there. I didn't. I asked what happened to the girl. Nobody saw her again, he said. Flash was done with that cellar after it got out. Moved along. What hooked me wasn't the content. It was the way he said, moved along, like the blue Flash rented apartments on a yearly lease. But people in rural Louisiana say all sorts of weird things in tidy, everyday tones, and you learn not to react big. I went home and did my own version of research. Asked line cooks I used to smoke with, asked a guy who fishes out there, asked an old woman 2 streets over who runs a thrift store and remembers when my dead grandfather was still drinking. They remembered a family named Brown. Explosion. Lake Catherine. But no one remembered a blue flash, and the twisting was either a joke they told me with raised eyebrows or a whispered detail they didn't feel comfortable owning. One guy said, "Oh, yeah, I got a chain email about that back in the day." The older folks shrugged. Maybe there was a fire. House blew. Happens. I went back to work the next week feeling half relieved, half annoyed at myself for letting Gary's voice crawl under my skin. The world rearranges itself easily when someone older pours confidence on a sentence. He told the story again 2 more times over the next month, tinkering with the order like he was a DJ layering in a drumbeat where it hadn't been before. On the 4th time, I cut him off in the middle of girl named, and I said, "I talk to people, man. They said you made it up from an email. That maybe you leaned on some tragedy and stitched your ego onto it." He got quiet in a way I hadn't seen yet. Quiet like there wasn't any air left in the cab of the truck. Then the quiet broke, and he barked what I first thought was a laugh, but it was too flat. "You want proof?" "There isn't any," I said, "because it didn't happen." He nodded like I'd offered him a choice on a menu he knew by heart, and then pulled his wallet. It was old leather, too soft in a way that means it's been sweated on. He eased a yellowed Polaroid out the way a man eases a dollar chip off a green felt table. He turned it so I could see the back. "You sure?" he said. "You want to not sleep right anymore?" I had this thin sheet of irritation over a thick, rubbery fear, and the sheet won for a second. I said, "Show me." He turned the photo around. I've been in a lot of basements. I've seen some pits and ancient furnaces that look like steel whales. I've seen shelves full of jam. I've seen prayer candles guttering at the foot of stairs for reasons I did not ask about. The image in his hand had the wrong relationship with darkness. The flash hadn't reached the corners. Something big and heavy filled the middle of the room. Stainless rollers, a hand crank, angles I couldn't tell the purpose of. On the wall behind it, a family portrait hung a little bit crooked. The drywall was ripped open in a neat oval, like someone had cut an access hole, and then decided halfway through they couldn't face what would look back. In the exposed studs, there was a shape. You ever look at something and your brain does you a kindness by translating it into something else you can live with? That's what it tried to do. Rope, it said. A mess of rope. Maybe a coiled, old power cable. Something that belonged to the machine. My stomach already knew the truth and tipped to one side. The curves had elbows and the cross sections weren't circles, they were layered like a jelly roll cake. I could see a stain on the drywall, that rust brown that comes through paint over time. It was the color hair turns when it's been under earth too long. I shoved his hand because I didn't want to slap the picture. I don't know why that matters. He wasn't offended. He was watching my face like he had waited for this particular expression. He slid the photo back into his wallet with the care a man gives a talisman. "Where'd you get that?" I said. My voice sounded like someone else ran it through a cheap plugin. "I took it," he said. "Had to. People don't believe words." He leaned back and smiled. "But you're right. Could be fake. You want me to say I'm scared? I want you to respect my rules." The smile didn't touch his eyes. Speaking of, he'd been giving me rules since day one, mostly good ones. The thing about learning a trade is half the lesson is in what not to do. He always liked lists, and he liked to spring them on me when my hands were full, so I had to repeat them like catechism with my mouth while my fingers were learning something else. He reached in the glove box and came up with an index card streaked with dirt and pencil. Things were crossed out, new ones added on top of old words. He tapped the paper with his gummy gray finger. Rule 1. Kill the breaker twice. Don't trust the click. Throw it, count to 7, throw it again. Then touch with the back of your hand, like you're checking a kid's fever. If it bites you, let bite the back, not the palm. Rule 2. If you smell pennies and cold air, stop breathing through your nose. Mouth only. 7 shallow breaths. Don't look around for the source. Don't call out. Rule 3. Never coil cord clockwise within city limits. Counterclockwise or straight lay only. If you catch me doing it wrong, slap my wrist. Rule 4. When you're in a basement you've never been in before, keep both feet on the rubber mat by the stairs. Don't step off until you've checked for traps. Electrical irregularities, he said, and winked. Rule 5. If you hear a voice behind the drywall, do not answer it. Don't promise it anything. Don't threaten it. Don't say you're going to call for help. If you can't leave, you sing. Nothing with words. A pitch. Keep your mouth open and hum. The thing about rules is most of them sound stupid until they save you. Number 1 is good practice. Breakers sometimes laugh at you and stay half alive. Number 4 sounded like nothing, just a rubber mat you throw by a service panel so you don't go to ground through your boots. It also sounded like one of those superstitions old guys carry like pocket rocks. Number 3, that one is almost funny. Guys rib each other for coiling hose wrong, but within city limits. Made it feel like a joke I wasn't yet on. He watched me read them all like a teacher waiting to see if the kid writes fast or slow. "You made up the last 2, I said. "I made up all of them," he said. "And then I live by them. Makes them true." He put the card back, but he didn't tuck it in the glove box neat. He slid it into the slot over the visor. A corner of it stuck out like a tongue. My eyes kept going back to it all day, even while we were pulling wire in an attic that had the temperature of a parked black car. The card stayed there afterward like a loose tooth in my mind. Little things started to overlap, like dreams finding the same house night after night. I noticed he hummed in basements. Not a song, a pitch. Sometimes he whistled it, like he needed it to be brighter. He counted to 7, under his breath, without moving his lips. He kept rubber mats around, more than any job needed, and he always put one at the top step even if the panel was on the far wall and we weren't going anywhere near the stairs. Half the time he stood on it like a kid, refusing to step off the sidewalk into the street until someone held his hand. Maybe all of that is harmless. Maybe all of it is what his old master taught him, and he stuck with it because an apprentice burned his hands and it made sense at the time. Maybe I should have laughed and kept coiling counterclockwise to make him happy. But when an old man says don't answer voices in the wall, you plant that somewhere in your brain you don't like to look. You know the rest of the outline. You've read it already. You're waiting for me to screw it up by adding aliens or an exorcist. I won't. I promise I'll follow the backbone. Just please, let me tell you how it felt with my skin on. Months passed. Gary didn't bring up Lake Catherine. Work leaned into a rhythm, like a song your hands remembered before your head did. I stopped cursing him in my car on the drive home. I never liked him, but I got used to the shape of his absence on weekends. Then, 2 nights ago, he tapped the bar I'd never seen him in with his empty shot glass and said my name like he was calling a dog he knew would come. I came. I don't know why. Maybe because he was the only person in 50 miles who knew exactly how heavy my tool belt was when I hung it up. He drank like he was trying to erase pencil marks. He told the same 3 stories in a loop until they started bleeding into one another. I kept pace badly and didn't want to win. When the whiskey was more on his shirt than in his mouth, he said he needed help peeing, and I kept him from falling face first into the urinal, gagging while he gagged. He leaned on me like rebar under wet concrete all the way to his house. It was a half-mile from the bar, like he said, and all the way there were these dumb things you notice when you're trying not to, like his front steps had anti-slip tape laid down exactly 7 strips wide. Inside was a smell I can't describe except to say it was not a particular stink, more like a residence of old metals and mothballs, and under it a sweetness like something had been recently washed off the floor and had left a ghost of itself in the mop water. The living room had stacks of envelopes on the floor, not messy, but arranged in a way that said he moved them around to think better. He fell onto the couch, and I threw a blanket over him and fetched a bowl because he said he was going to hurl again. He did. Stringy. He wiped his mouth with the edge of the blanket, and I didn't say anything because old men earn that kind of disrespect from fabric. Then he turned his head on the cushion and said with his eyes closed, "Blue flash spoke to me." "Let's not," I said. I was done with his world building. "Not like an angel," he said, eyes still closed, the liquor pulling syllables out of his mouth like gum. "It's not words, more like pressure." But I knew what it meant, same way you know when someone behind you opens their hand. It told me the dates, same time every year, and then it told me how to make one. The word hung like spit he was too tired to swallow. He kept talking even after I said I didn't want to hear. "You can make a little one," it said. "It can lure. It can pull at what isn't attached anymore. People's thinking. You can make them walk where you want them to walk. You can make them lay down. You can make them fit." He showed his teeth. Maybe it was a smile, but it didn't have any temperature. And then, he slept like a puppet someone cut the strings on. His mouth kept moving for a minute. I put my hand on his chest to make sure his lungs remembered their job. He was mumbling. "Live forever," he said, and squeeze, and poor girl. And I sat there and looked at the bowl and thought about calling his daughter if he had one and realized I didn't know if he had anyone at all. I should have left. I would have. Except he opened his eyes enough to stick a finger up like he was giving a toast, and he said, "Don't go in the basement." He said it so clear it stuck to the air like frost. "Don't snoop." It is amazing how quickly a human brain will do the exact thing it's told not to do, especially after someone admits they keep a small version of God in a room below their house. He snored. I waited a minute to make sure the rhythm held. My feet moved without me. The hallway to the kitchen had a runner carpet, and under that, right before the door with the old brass knob, was a rubber mat. It was gray, nulogo, that kind of institutional rubber that smells like new tires. My left foot stepped onto it before my right, like a child stepping onto ice. I don't know why I noticed that. I don't know why I'm telling you. Maybe because I followed his dumb rule without meaning to, and if I hadn't, maybe you wouldn't be hearing me. I opened the door, and the smell came at me like a blanket someone had left in the sun. Pennies, cold air, damp as a closet. The stairs were narrow, builder-grade wood with 30 years of foot oil rubbed into the center. I used my phone's light because the switch did nothing. Electricians' houses, they say, are half-finished and jerry-rigged because after you build for everyone else you don't want to fix your own. Maybe that's all. Maybe he never got around to this circuit. The beam hit a shape and my chest pulled tight. The rollers looked bigger up close than they had in the Polaroid, and they had a nap to them. Not smooth, but the kind of texture a metal shop uses to keep things from slipping. The handle had a wooden grip, so human, so made for repetitive motion my palm tingled just looking at it. I set the light down on a shelf to free my hands. The steel had brown patches that weren't rust. Darker, almost purple where it collected at the ends. I leaned in without touching. The flash on that old photo hadn't lied. On the nearest wall, a family portrait, not Gary's. I recognized the kind of clothing. Casual nice. Department store backdrop. A girl with her bangs pinned back. Her father with the kind of belt buckle that says he still thinks about the one time he rode a bull for more than 8 seconds. Her mother in a blue blouse. Another kid, younger, squinting because he doesn't like being told to sit still. It was a picture that screams, "We are fine," while the world builds a case against it. It was hung with the same crooked twist from the photo in the truck. It didn't make sense for it to be the exact same one. Polaroids don't age like that. But there it was, the same tilt, the same tiny white crack in the lower left corner of the frame's glass. Behind a family portrait, drywall had been cut and hastily screwed back in, like someone made a decision and then walked it back and then made it again. I turned to the machine. There were marks in the concrete floor where it had been slid away and back in the same direction so many times the aggregate in the concrete had been exposed. I put my hand near the handle and felt cold come off it, not like metal, but like something that wanted to dry my tongue. That's when I heard it. The soft, wet inhale of a child who cried themselves sick an hour ago and can't quite open their nose. It came in little puffs. I turned, expecting to see Gary swaying in the doorway, but the sound wasn't there. It was behind me. It was inside the wall. You don't have to believe me. I don't care if you do. I put my cheek to the drywall and felt a vibration that didn't match the breathing I heard. This was faster. An insect buzz or a fluorescent light getting ready to eat itself. It made my teeth hum in tune, and without meaning to, I did what his rules said. I opened my mouth and a little note leaked out. Not a song, a sound. I didn't do it on purpose. I did it because the alternative was letting the wall draw breath for me. The inhale paused. Someone groaned, warped, like the spool of a cassette that's been left on a dash in summer for 3 months. And then, help. One word pushed through a slit. The sound of the H was wrong. No wind to it, just pressure. I ran. Of course I ran. I made it one step up, and he was there, holding on to the jam like the house itself was trying to shake him off. Fury looks different on old faces. It shows up in every angle at once, and what made me stumble wasn't his anger, it was his strength. He filled the doorway with his small, dense body. He raised his hands, and something shredded the air between them like tape. He talked. Not English, not Latin either. People write, it sounded like. I won't. It was a prayer someone told him to learn, and every consonant stuck halfway out his mouth and chose not to dissolve. Behind me, the air cracked open. I didn't see the light. I felt it. It was like a sheet of white laid over my back. I was a child under a hospital x-ray, except it went through me from both sides. It was so bright I saw the outline of my ribs against my eyelids. My shirt smoked. It smelled like pennies and the first breath you take on a January morning after a week of rain. He laughed while he said the words, and the laugh harmonized with the hum behind the wall. That was almost worse than the heat. I hit him. There isn't another verb. I didn't barrel into him or maneuver. I moved my body into his on purpose. We went together. He went down the way heavy things go when distributed wrong. Slowly, like the earth was trying to give him another chance to redistribute his weight. He put his hands on me, and I could feel tendons run over bone like bowstrings. He wasn't as drunk as he sounded. He was strong in the way men who grip and crank for a living are strong. But I wriggled out of it because fear changes the way you grease your joints. I squirmed like a fish that wants to go back to the ocean. He grabbed my belt and I slipped out of it. My pants fell an inch and I ran anyway. I ran like I've never run in my life. He followed to the doorway and said one more line of that language, and the hallway lights dimmed and brightened with the syllable. The bowl on the coffee table rang like a bell. The envelopes on the floor fluttered, and I realized they weren't envelopes. They were Polaroids turned face down. The bar was still open. I barreled through people and said nothing. I slid behind the wheel and drove home wrong. Adrenaline is a map you follow badly. The whole way my back felt like someone else's skin was laying on top of mine, a little too cool, and my hand shook so hard my phone rattled against my thigh. I didn't sleep. I stared out the crack in the blinds, waiting for him, waiting for something blue to float up the street like a police light that forgot it needed a car. At 7 a.m., I clattered pans in the sink and told my girlfriend I quit. She laughed without standing up from her phone. "You're not funny," she said. I put my palms on the table and told her the truth, my mouth trying to keep up with my lungs. She looked at me like you look at a dog who drops a wet sock at your feet, expecting a prize. "Baby," she said, and then she didn't finish because she knew I could hear what she would say if she did. "Coward. Liar. Something's wrong with you. Get help." I tried the police. I tried to do it correctly, even though I knew the shape of how they glanced toward the clock while I talked. I said, "I think there are people in a wall. I think someone's keeping people alive, or something like alive. I think there's a machine. I think there's a man who believes he can live forever and might, if we let him." I made it as compact as I could. They said, "Sir, what's your name?" They said, "Are you high?" They said, "That's a serious accusation. You can't, you shouldn't, say things unless." They took notes with the kind of posture that says the paper is a maze you won't ever get out of. The union? They thought I had a grievance about hours. My boss said, "You don't give 2 weeks and you think I'm going to vouch for your next placement?" My coworkers laugh the way people laugh when they're trying to prove a story didn't get into their ears. I don't blame any of them. I know how I sound. I know the world does not want me to be right. I came home, sat on the edge of the tub, and moved my shirt up to look at my back in the mirror. 3 places where the skin was pink and puffy and straight, nearly parallel lines, and in the middle a patch the size of my hand where my pores had pinched tight with heat. It looked like a sunburn drawn with a ruler. I touched it and winced and pulled away and smelled the tip of my finger. Pennies. Always pennies. There's more. Of course there's more. The plant, the part of the story that lurks. The index card from the truck. I saw it again, in his house, but not the one in the visor. A different card. Same handwriting. Same pencil pressure. Above the basement doorknob was a cluster of posts. It's like a bouquet of jaundiced petals. He'd written dates on them. November 1st, November 2nd, November 3rd. Sometimes the dates were scratched out and replaced with October 15th. October 16th. One said, in careful block letters, Lake C. Another said, PA pickup short route. One, curled from the sticky dyeing, read, Ohio done. A grocery list with ice circled 3 times was stuck underneath. All of it was the kind of thing you can see and tell yourself there's a reasonable interpretation even while your stomach knocks on your spine. I almost ripped one down when I passed. I didn't. I don't know why. You want a thread you can worry with your fingers? Here, Rule 3, the clockwise thing. You think it's just apprentice hazing. It isn't. He had me unspool 200 feet of heavy gauge cable one afternoon because I forgot and coiled clockwise without thinking. He didn't shout. He said, we don't twist what's going to twist us. And that line didn't make sense until the wall learned my name with its breath. I can still hear him in my head, patient as a teacher. Counterclockwise, son. Always away from the sun, not toward it. He said city limits because he doesn't do this shit out in the country. He brings people home. You want something deceptively safe? Rule 4, the rubber mat. If you think it's just about getting shocked, you've never met old fear. It's about staying on something that touches the ground in only one place. It's about not letting whatever sits under a house measure you. If I'd stepped off that mat in one long stride, I think the flash would have opened my spine like a zipper. He wanted me to step through the doorway because he knew what pressed against the threshold. The mat isn't there because we're electricians. It's there because he's a priest. I know how mad that sounds. I also know I'm not wrong. He told me the words were a prayer, and my bones believed him even if my head won't. I am packing. The suitcase stinks like old basement because I keep checking my skis for a scent no one else can pick out. I called my aunt in Pennsylvania and told her I'm coming and asked if she had a couch. And she said, of course, honey, like we still talk weekly, like I didn't ignore her last 3 Christmas cards because I couldn't face her wanting me to want more for myself. I told my girlfriend I loved her and this is me loving her. She said, I'm not going. I said, you don't have to. She said, good luck. I said, please don't let anyone in to fix the breaker if you haven't called them. She rolled her eyes. She used to love my superstition when it meant I checked the stove twice before bed. It's not cute anymore. I took my boots off just now and noticed something stupid that made my throat close up. There's grit in the tread that sparkles pale blue when I tilt the sole under the lamp. It's probably nothing. It's probably mastic from some floors we demoed last week. It's probably just the way a certain kind of dust picks up light. I scraped it with a key, and it made this sound my ear recognizes from the basement, a tiny, almost organic squeak I can't name. On my kitchen table is the card, not the one from his truck. Mine. I copied it the night after he showed me, because my hands have this need to make lists out of fear. My handwriting is messy. I wrote it thinking I was making fun of him a little. I wrote it because I thought superstition is another way to draw a circle around yourself in a world where you don't get to control much. Now I read it like a will. Rule 1. Kill the breaker twice. Save the backs of your hands for the burn, not the front. Rule 2. If it smells like pennies and cold, don't sniff like a dog. Don't be polite to a thing that wants to know what you're made of. Rule 3. Counterclockwise. Your hand wants to do the wrong thing when you're tired. Don't let it. Rule 4. Stay on the rubber if there's a rubber. Don't make yourself the last foot of the circuit. Rule 5. Never answer a wall, even when it knows how to make the vowel in your name, even when it says please. He had other rules, I'm sure. He kept them in his throat and on those cards, and he moved them around the way he moved those Polaroids. You think I'm making a ritual out of a job? I am. You should. Every job is a ritual if you do it long enough. He made his into a church with no God and a basement where people never stop breathing. After I left his house, after the bowl rang and the envelopes fluttered and I ran, I sat in my car with the engine off and heard ticking. Not the cooling engine, the other ticking. The sound big empty rooms make after an event happens and the temperature decides to level. The sound of an altarpiece drying after someone spit on it. The kind of sound you get once, and then you spend the rest of your life hearing in other things like TVs cooling down or the crackle of a cigarette someone forgot on a glass ashtray. He's going to come for me. I don't mean that metaphorically. He told me without telling me when he said, Pennsylvania, short route. He likes collections. He said one from every state, and I laughed back then because it sounded like the kind of thing a murderer who believes he's doing God's work would say to himself in a movie. He said, poor girl, and I heard the crack behind the glass and the family photo makes sense. He said live forever, and I saw his tendons work his hands in a way that didn't match his face. Of course he'll want me, because I saw the room where he keeps his logic. Of course he'll want to fix the little break in his system. People like him don't leave open circuits. If you hire an electrician, look at their boots. Look at their hands. Ask them to coil a cord and see which way their fingers go without thinking. Put a rubber mat by your stairs and see whether their face relaxes when they step on it. If a man you don't know hums one long note in your basement, tell him you have to take a call and walk into the sun and don't go back inside until he leaves. Do not, under any circumstance, smell something copper and tell yourself you're just thinking about noses. I'm not begging you to believe me. I don't even fully believe me half the time. The picture in my head keeps switching back to rope. The machine keeps rebranding itself as a pasta roller. The breath in the wall becomes rats. The prayer turns into a stroke victim slur. I take solace in skepticism because it makes most days livable. But when I close my eyes, I see light without seeing it, and my back warms up and the air around me drops 10 degrees. And I know he taught me rules because he needed me to live long enough to do something stupid. I'm throwing this in your lap because if I keep it, it'll increase. That's the word that fits. Increase. The way static builds when you rub a balloon on a sweater. The way pressure rises in a water heater when the relief valve's been glued shut by a lazy man who wants his job to be over by 5. If you hear about a guy in Louisiana who takes payment in beer and shows up on time and laughs like he's dragging a chair, don't try to test him. Don't ask him about Lake Catherine. Don't ask him about the Browns. Don't tell him you've heard a story on the internet and you want facts. You'll get a Polaroid. You'll get a rubber mat. You'll get a basement that doesn't want to be a basement anymore. I'm going to Pennsylvania. I'll sleep on my aunt's couch with my shoes on for a while. I'll stack boxes against the basement door. There are no basements in most of Louisiana, but there are there. I'll think about rules and how they keep you and how they trap you. I'll drink coffee until my nerves decide to sing on their own. I'll listen to the way old houses breathe. I'll count to 7 before I turn on any breaker, because 7 is what my bones vote for now. I'll call my girlfriend from the road, even though she won't answer because she's tired of this. I'll check my mirrors every hour, and if I see a bald man in a truck keeping pace with me without trying too hard, I'll take an exit. I don't know. He will come. Not tonight, maybe not this week, but he will. It gives him pleasure, I think, to treat the map like a crossword, to fill in the blank states, to add me as a doodle in the margin that makes the puzzle prettier. You are not exempt. You are not just reading. He likes power lines that look like ribs. He likes rooms that smell like snow and coins. He likes bright. He looks like he could fix the light, fixture your kid keeps saying flickers at night. He could. He will. That's how it starts. If you think I'm exaggerating, I hope you stay lucky. If you think I'm right, don't go in the basement. If you hear a voice in the wall, don't answer it. If your electrician offers you a rubber mat, put it down and stand where he tells you. Just this once, listen, because some rules sound safe and stupid at the same time and still keep you alive. I'm not safe anywhere, not really, but distance is still a comfort animals understand. I've got family up north who will take me in and keep talking while I stare at the window. I can't make anyone believe me. Not my coworkers, not my boss, not the cops, not the woman I sleep beside. Maybe not you. I'm telling you anyway because warnings are another kind of prayer. It's almost November. The air is how it gets before something snaps. Do what you want. Hire who you want. Just know that he's going to be around for a while, and he could be anywhere. Don't end up in Gary's walls.